All right, guys, it's the last section of Chapter 4, which has been our second unit, all about zeros and finding zeros and things happening around zeros. So our last one is about inequalities. And so, oh man, hopefully my new pen works. All right, I was in laser pointer mode, and now I think I'm in writing mode, so we're good. So if I can't turn it around and use my eraser like I could last time. All right, so we are going to talk about radical inequalities, and the biggest thing that's different is this inequality, but also we need to check the domain, and so hopefully I'll be able to talk about that when we'll get to it, but it's kind of like the last step here. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to talk about how you solve this, and it's important because when we're doing inequalities, you sometimes have to divide by a negative number. And when you divide by a negative number, the sign flips. So this is a note you need to take. When you divide by a negative number, you flip the inequality. And that's, of course, this thing right here that you're flipping, okay? So make sure you keep aware of this. It's not when you divide a negative number, it's when you divide by a negative number. Okay, so first example, isolate. We don't have anything to isolate. Okay, next is going to be to eliminate. So remember, we're going to eliminate this by squaring both sides. Okay, so when you square both sides, over here, you get 10 squared, which is 100. Over here, you just get 4x plus 5, so I'll write it one more time. Okay, I'm going to subtract 5, and I'm going to have 4x. Okay, and then I'm going to divide by 4, and you are going to get a decimal. So x is less than or equal to 23.75, or 23 3/4. The problem here, guys, is that when we think about a square root, I can't have a 0 underneath the radical. So I mean a negative number. So this can't be less than 0. Okay, so 4x plus 5 has to be greater than or equal to 0. And that is because, this is like the domain part here, that is because we can't have a negative number underneath the radical. Okay, so I have to solve one more thing. I have to subtract 5 from both. Okay, and divide by 4. Now I'm dividing a negative number, but I'm not dividing by a negative number. So I'm okay. I don't have to flip my sign. And I'm going to leave it like this. So what does that mean? If I drew a number line like we were doing the last time we were doing inequalities, negative 5/4 would be over here. I don't know, 23.75 would be somewhere over here. For 4x plus 5, all of my solutions are up to and equal to 23.75, and all the way down to and equal to negative 5/4, which would be negative 1.25 if you like decimals. Okay, it would be all these numbers within here. How do you check this? Well, you plug in 23.75 and see that you get the answer 10. But also, it's this domain piece, this part where I know that under a square root or a fourth root, I can't have a negative number. If I was going to say one of the biggest tripping points on the test, it would be this, that you forget to like find the other part where you know under the radical can't be negative. All right, so another example. We're going to isolate the radical. It's already isolated, so we don't have to do anything. So I'm going to square both sides. So when I square both sides, now I have 3x plus 5 greater than 1, because 1 squared is 1. I'm going to subtract 5 3x greater than negative 4. And again, I'm dividing a negative number, but not by a negative number. So I get this. I'm hoping that you see here that since we said that this thing here has to be greater than 1, that we kind of already checked the domain part, because now I want to know, like, where is this greater than or equal to 0? I've already taken care of that because I found over here where it was greater than 1. And if you solve this, you'll get 3x greater than or equal to negative 5, so x greater than or equal to negative 3/5. Or aren't I already greater than or equal to negative 3/5 if I'm greater than 4/3? So this is my entire answer for this, because it's already positive here, because it's already greater than 1. This is my last example, and it's actually an example from yesterday, and you're going to do a homework problem like this, and there's possibly one like this on the test, so I think it's important. When we isolate this one, we can't do anything to isolate it, so we're going to square both sides. And a pitfall that we had a lot in Chapter 1 was that when we see this here, we forget that this means that we need to FOIL. So this really means 2x minus 3 times 2x minus 3. Okay, so I get 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 5x plus 5. And then I'm going to move everything to one side to try and get this equal to 0, because I noticed I have to FOIL this, or not FOIL it, but factor it. So it has to be equal to 0. This is more good review, because factoring is also on your test. And this is one that you are either going to want to use the quadratic formula or AC method. So I'm going to go through the AC method with you for a reminder. So you take A times C, so 4 times 4 is 16. And then I want factors of 16 that add to negative 17. So I have minus 1 and minus 16 is what I'm going to use. And then I'm going to rewrite this middle term like this. Cut it down the middle. I'm going to take an x out of here and have 4x. Oh, I think I wrote the minus twice. And then I'm going to take oops, I wrote 17 instead of 16. That's not the eraser. Working on it, guys. Should be 16. I was wondering why that wasn't going to factor out nicely. All right, so 16 and minus 1 minus 16. If I take a 4 out of here, I'm left with 4x minus 1. So my two factors are x minus 4 and 4x minus 1. That means my x's equal 0 and 1/4. Okay? So here's an example of where there's an extraneous solution, and I'm running out of room to show you, but if you plug in both of these, one of them does not work. So when I plug in 0, what happens? I plug in 0 and I get the square root of 5 equals, I shouldn't have 0 as one of my answers. I'm having lots of problems, aren't I, guys? The answer here should be 4, right? Not 0. So 4, okay? So when I plug in 4, I'm going to get the square root of 20 plus 5 equals 8 minus 3, square root of 25 equals 5. Check mark, that one works. Okay, and when I plug in 1/4, I get 5 times 1/4 plus 5 equals 2 times 1/4 minus 3. So the square root of 5/4, running out of room, plus 5 equals 1/2 minus 3. Now I'm hoping that you're seeing what's happening here, is that 1/2 minus 3 is going to be negative 2 1/2. And no matter what I put in here, I can't take the square root and get a negative number. This answer is not going to work. So this is the only answer that works.